Our next speaker is we start to work on the afternoon session, right? Леонид Вишняцкий. Archaeology of the issue of the genesis of the world.
Sorry. The geneticist certainly are to blame. But the sad reality is that people started to kill each other well before any geneticist came into being. And this is actually what I'm going to talk about. What I'm going to do is first to give a very general historical background to the problem, and second to share with you some very preliminary observations which hopefully may be of some use for further discussions of armed violence in prehistory. And I would like to start my talk with a citation from Barack Obama's Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech, in which he said, "War, in one form or another, appeared with the first man." And by saying this, he associated himself with an old and very respectful philosophical tradition, an old idea which is believed to go back to Thomas Hobbes. To be sure, Hobbes never wrote a word about prehistory or the first man or primordial state of man. What he did write about was the natural state of man, and by natural state of man he meant stateless state, sorry for tautology, stateless state of man with no authorities, no administration, no government, no powers, no state. And according to him, this state was a state of constant wars. Bellum omnium contra omnis, the war of all against all. The alternative point of view was put forward a century later, in the middle of the 18th century, first by Charles Montesquieu, and several years later by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Both of them believed that war was a relatively recent phenomenon because, according to them, first people who lived in the earliest historical period just had nothing to fight for, meaning that they had no possessions worthy of bloodshed. These two traditions coexisted for nearly 300 years, and during most of this period, the proponents based their arguments mainly or even exclusively on ethnographic evidence. But at the very end of the last century of the 20th century, the situation changed, and archaeological data, archaeological evidence very quickly came to the foreground. And this is reflected, for example, in the appearance of a number of books on the subject written by archaeologists like Lawrence Keeley and Stephen LeBlanc and the French archaeologist Guillain and so on. And there are many collections of archaeological articles devoted to the subject now. This role change, in my view, it's very easy to explain. I'm afraid, and I really am scared to say so, but to my mind, when we are talking about prehistory, archaeological materials have at least two very important advantages of ethnographic data. First, while ethnographic data still plays and will certainly play a very important role in discussing these issues, it's naturally limited, it's nearly exhausted. There are very few or no pristine hunter-gatherers in modern world. There are very few or no horticulturalists and so on, and correspondingly there is no hope to obtain new, fresh data which could shed more light on the nature and the character of violence in prehistory. And quite the contrary, the deposits of archaeological materials are nearly inexhaustible, unlimited, and at least they are sufficient to provide with jobs many generations of archaeologists, including those who are interested in this issue, in the issue of prehistoric violence and prehistoric warfare. And second advantage is that people who provided us with information about hunters-gatherers and other traditional groups never were the first messengers of civilization. They always were preceded by European or North American or Chinese and so on goods and by epidemic disease. Just one example. In a recently published autobiographic book, Napoleon Chagnon mentions in passing, just in a footnote, that before he started his famous research among Yanomama, these people had already got some European goods, including, by the way, firearms, steel axe, and some other things. And by the same time, by the time he started his work, they survived a very severe epidemic. Don't remember, sort of maybe it was smallpox, something like it. And of course, both goods and disease strongly affected the traditional ways of life and relations between people and between human groups. As to archaeology, of course, neither bones nor stones never speak for themselves, but at least they don't lie. We are often lying instead of them, not they themselves. So what can archaeological evidence tell us about the frequency, intensity, and dynamics of armed violence in prehistory? There are 5, maybe 6 main groups of archaeological indicators of armed violence and war. Bones, bearing wounds inflicted by other persons or by weapons. Battle arms, meaning specialized arms designed for killing other people, not for hunting animals like arrows, but to kill people like swords, and not only arms but also armor like shields and so on. The third group are, of course, depictions of violence, battle scenes in arts. The fourth group are defense or fortifications, which are often associated with threats of attacks like thousands of arrowheads scattered along enclosures or walls and so on and so on. And the fifth group are burials, mass burials of victims of war or armed violence. we look at the chronology of these groups, we shall immediately see that all of them appear at the very late of the Stone Age, in the Neolithic and even in the late Neolithic. The only exception to this rule are bones, human bones, with trace of traumatic injuries inflicted, presumably or apparently inflicted by other persons, by other people. And the other exclusion is mass burials of war victims, like Metaruk in Kenya or Torsabiha in Sudan, and several more in Europe. All the other indicators of war appear at the same time, or approximately at the same time, at the end of the Stone Age. Of course, this does not mean that there were no fortifications or specialized arms designed for killing other people before the Neolithic time. As we all know, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and the absence, for example, of shields and swords among the finds coming from Paleolithic sites may be simply due to the following factors, not to their real absence. And the same can be said about many other kinds of evidence. But we have to work with what we have, and what we have are virtually are human bones with traumatic lesions. And this is the only reliable kind of evidence which allows to assess the character and dynamics of violence in prehistory. Most of these traces, and I mean the trace of wounds on ancient human bones, are difficult to identify and even more difficult to interpret. Usually it's hard or impossible to say with confidence whether or not the trauma was inflicted by another person or was just a result of some whole accident, right? Like falling from a tree, like this one, the famous skull from Mama. In China, usually this lesion is considered as indication of violence. And still, the anthropologists who analyzed the spine did not exclude that this lesion could have resulted from some other kind of, from some other accident, having nothing to do with interpersonal conflict. Actually, the only absolutely reliable evidence of violence we have for the period before 15,000 years ago is this find from Sungay 1, published by Trenkaus and Buzhilova. And this man had puncture, probably spearhead or arrowhead puncture in his upper thoracic vertebra, which is considered to be the reliable evidence of violent interaction. However, let me skip it. That is a very special and very interesting and very informative subset of anthropological evidence, which provides us with the most reliable source of data about prehistoric violence. I mean human bones with projectiles embedded in them. Human bones with embedded projectiles are the only reliable evidence of violence, because it's hard to imagine how else could people get these wounds. There are no other ways to interpret them, simply no other ways to interpret them. The violence is the only possible explanation. And so what can we do with this kind of evidence, this very special kind of evidence? What I did, I compiled all the information available in literature, all the information about the finds of human bones with embedded projectiles. And it's quite natural that the number of such finds increase with time. However, this tells us nothing about the dynamics of violence, because the number of human bones coming from the Neolithic sites is several magnitudes of order greater than the number of human bones coming from the Paleolithic sites, and so it's quite natural and predictable that the number of bones with embedded, the number of Neolithic bones with embedded projectiles will be greater than the number of Paleolithic bones of the same kind. What we need is some common denominator, something that can be used as a datum point, which we could use to compare the evidence we have from different stages of prehistory. And for the time being, I cannot think of any other type of datum point except animal bones with embedded projectiles. So what I did first, I compiled all data about the finds of animal bones with embedded projectiles, and I compared the numbers of animal bones and human bones with embedded projectiles from different stages of prehistory. And here is, actually this graph is the crux of my argument, and we can see interesting that before 15,000 years ago, there are about a dozen animal bones, projectile-pierced animal bones, and what's interesting, they come from different areas, from Africa, from Europe, from Siberia, West Siberia, North Siberia, and at the same time, for the same period, we have zero human bones with embedded projectiles. But when we look at the next time period, final Paleolithic and Mesolithic, or period between 15 and 8,000 years ago, the situation changed. The number of human bones with projectiles is nearly as big as the number of animal bones. And I think this can tell us something about the change in the character and intensity of violence in this period of prehistory. Given that the number of animal bones excavated from the final Paleolithic and Mesolithic sites is several orders of magnitude greater than the number of human bones, the parity between the number of human and animal bones with embedded projectiles may signify that some very important changes were taking place in relations between humans and between human societies. And I presented the same evidence at several different scales with different degree of resolution, but every time we see the same picture. And in the Neolithic, the situation changed again. We had very few animal bones with embedded projectile, which may be due just to the transition to producing economy, but at the same time we have many more arrowheads in archaeological record. And the number of human bones with embedded projectiles sharply increased again. Just an example, for the Neolithic of Western Eurasia, and by Western Eurasia I mean West Europe, West Asia, and Central Europe. No, Eastern Europe is included. Eastern Europe is not included in the sample. For Western Eurasia, we have at least, and I published this database in 2018. There are 82 specimens of human bones with embedded projectiles, just for one area, for Western Eurasia. And for the same area, we have only 5 or 6 animal bones with embedded projectiles. So this, of course, there are many gaps in the evidence, and what I presented here is partly it's like an average temperature for the hospital. And there are many gaps, as I said. For example, it's difficult to explain why we have many human bones with embedded projectiles from Spain, France, Central Europe, we have some evidence from Britain, British Isles, from Scandinavia, and at the same time we have no evidence of the kind from Italy, which is strange because people started to farm land, started agriculture in Italy earlier than in Central Europe, and we have no evidence of this kind in the Balkans, and I have no explanation for this fact. And so we should not forget that the data we have are never complete, and archaeological evidence is never enough, is never sufficient to make far-reaching conclusions. We always want more and more, but for the time being, the available data seems to suggest that war was a relatively infrequent event in the earliest stages of prehistory, and that it was only in the late Neolithic that the specialized spheres or reals of culture associated with war and designed for serving war began to form, which found reflection in many different realms of activity, like building and handicrafts and arts and so on. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Question, please. Okay.
So the data that you were using were mostly from Eurasia. You were looking at evidence from Africa or the Americas?
Now, as I said, the data I was using, they're not from Russia. In Russia, we had very few data of the kind, so I used evidence from all of the old world. I did not take American data from America because they're very limited in time, but North Africa and Europe and East Asia were taken into account.
How do you think could your diagrams be explained by the type of killing animals that dramatically changed when the production economy started. So you couldn't maybe find these wanted traces on the animal bones after Neolithic time, just because they killed animals in another way. They were not hunting. No?
And other ways, which other ways they could use to kill animals, for example, I can't imagine. They killed them in barrels, they killed them with stone projectiles or thrusting spells, and the same was the case in Neolithic. If we talk about middle and large size animals, of course not about rabbits or dogs.
Thank you so much for your presentation and short additional question. How do you think, have you information about some injuries connected with the ritual killing inside your cases? То есть какие-нибудь ритуальные убийства случаи включены в вашу практику, связанную с войной?
Well, some of the drawings dating from the Neolithic hint that they may be representations of ceremonial killings, of executions, and so on. As for the fossil evidence, I mean bone and skeletal evidence, I can't imagine how we can discern between ritual killing or battle killing.
According to your data, you have a Neolithic, which is quite long period, and I want to ask, in the European literature you can read, okay, there's very few documents of Neolithic warfare or violence, and then there's a significant increase in the Metal Ages and Bronze Age. Could you see this in your data collection as well?
Actually, we have lots of evidence from the Neolithic period, and I never studied later periods, so I'm not very interested in the later stages of history. I think myself is Sorry, yeah, it's usually believed that the so-called military horizon appears at the turn of stone and ornamental periods, and the Bronze Age witnessed sharp increase in the rates of violence, but I never collected any data which can prove or disprove this point of view.
More questions, please? Everything is okay? No, I want to ask small, maybe basic questions. The last day before to leave here, I noticed, моя impression. Мне попалась заметка новая генетиков о том, что во время 7000 веке, да, ну, то есть 70,000 веке, there was a big war, and they called it the zero, World War, and the people, men, killed men. So the conclusion was almost a small number of men was left after this. Did you read it?
Yeah, I read it. I can't say nothing. I just read it and it's very interesting, and maybe I'll use it sometime. But yeah, the conclusion that the number of men sharply decreased in the beginning of the Neolithic and some eras is very interesting.
It's really. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.